Hey there, Brooke. How's it going today?
Conrad, what's up, man? How's it going?
Doing good. I'm excited to be with Tony today. I think it's going to be a productive conversation. I'm curious, Brooke, how'd you originally meet Tony?
Oh my gosh, what happened? I think Tony just reached out to me out of the blue. He's a ultimate networker and just reached out
Sounds
and
like something I would do. Yeah.
reached out and said, "Hey, I see you online and stuff like that. Would love to chat." And we just kind of hit it off and talking about the short-term industry and how he was getting into it. And yeah, I guess the rest is history.
The rest is history, so to speak. Well, Tony Cappaert, welcome to the show. We appreciate you. I would love like a little background, if you don't mind, about you, how you kind of got into the space. I think you have a very
Sure.
interesting background. You didn't, get into it in a very normal way. So I'd love to kind of hear your background, if you don't mind, as we get going here.
Yeah, of course. Well, first, thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited to dig in and happy to share more about me and what we're up to at Blue Maple. Yeah, to your point, my background, I'm not from the industry, right? I've only been in this world for the last couple of years. The bulk of my career has been in venture-backed software. So previously, I ran a company in the real estate space called Contactually. It was a SaaS CRM company selling to real estate agents and brokerages. Grew that over 8 years, sold it in 2019 to Compass, big real estate brokerage. And it was great in lots of ways. Nice cash transaction for me, for my investors, and I had an opportunity to figure out what was next as I was resting investing at Compass largely. And in the midst of that, my wife and I bought a little cabin in West Virginia. We started renting it on the side, like I think a lot of us who got in this space. And it was just printing money. And it was doing exceptionally well. I went to my wife and said, why don't we buy like a dozen of these cabins or 2 dozen? Let's just be these, own this little cash flowing empire in West Virginia. She was not excited about that. And it's a long winded way of saying it forced my hand to think, well, if I want to really professionalize this and deploy more of my own money in operating high quality vacation rentals, what could that look like? I formed Blue Maple as a fund where we take my capital, other folks' capital, where we buy the properties, we outfit them exactly as we think guests will really enjoy and have a great experience, and then we operate them for really high cash flow for the investors in the fund. Today, we've got about 75 properties across a couple different states, but largely drive-to destinations outside of DC, where I live. And yeah, we've just been growing a lot. We're still acquiring a couple cabins every month, so it's been doing really well.
Wow.
Mhm.
Are you finding it more challenging now, I guess, to acquire some of these properties at the right, cap rates and returns that you're looking for?
Yeah, so we have really high bar in terms of the yield that we're looking for after everything. So net of debt service, net of property management fees, utilities, we're looking for 15% plus cash yield. So literally cash that we're paying out every year, and that's really hard to find, and it's getting harder because there's four headwinds that we're dealing with. Right, property prices continue to go up. The revenue that from COVID era when it was all time high has come down. OpEx has gone up, right? Cost of labor and utilities has gone up. And what's the last one? Oh, and
Interest rates?
interest
Are
rates have gone up.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So it's like all these headwinds are there's like forcing the buy box smaller and smaller. That said, there are far fewer buyers, right? So
Mm.
so we can, when we find something that's really quality, we can win it, right? So it's a blessing and a curse. But yeah, we're continuing to find deals. We're also just getting better both at finding deals and then operating them. So maybe previously we would have driven net income of X. Now we'll get 1.1x, right? We'll do a little bit better net income because we're cutting expenses or we're doing a better job pricing, et cetera. So it's both.
What happens when you actually sell the property? Do you have obviously any kind of targets on exiting the properties, or is it like a buy and hold forever kind of a thesis?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. So half of the investors that are in our funds, they, I mean, look, it's really high cash flow, right? They get like, where else can you get 15% cash in addition to equity appreciation? And so half those folks are like, look, if we can keep doing this indefinitely, and you guys are willing to manage it indefinitely, let's do that. So I suspect there will be a very large chunk of our portfolio that will just operate indefinitely. However, the funds are structured as 10-year funds. So they're pretty long, but they do have a life. How we operate is at the 10-year mark. For those investors who want liquidity, we'll go back to them and essentially do evaluation across the portfolio. We'll resell properties. Either we'll buy them, right? We'll raise additional capital and we will buy out the investors, or we'll just resell the properties. But at this point, we've been at it for 3 years. Returns have been really strong. Both the yield has been really high and the equity values
Yeah.
have gone up tremendously, right? That's the glass half full of the prices continuing to go up, is like all the stuff that we own, the equity values are up a lot. So I suspect we'll be in it for the long haul, and we'll continue to just grow this portfolio over time.
That's great. And I'm seeing more and more companies doing kind of what you're doing, but I mean, this was nobody was really doing this in short-term rentals that long ago, but we're seeing more and more kind of funds getting into this space. But honestly, I don't think I've seen anyone just dial in the process like you have. So caps off to you for that. But yeah, I mean, yes, last question, then we'll jump into your mistakes. Is there,
Sure.
is there anything specific that you find in some of these properties that are like the best performing properties? Is there any kind of, I don't want you to like give away your
Yeah.
secret, but like any kind of things that just really optimize, or is it really just based on location and the property, size, or what is it?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's two thoughts come to mind off the bat in terms of, I think, where we've been successful. Our bread and butter is when we go into this like drive-to destination market. It's not a traditional vacation rental market. In fact, there weren't really rentals 20 years ago before the advent of Vrbo and Airbnb, et cetera, because there was no, it just wasn't a market for that. However, they're close enough to the city where there is a lot of guest demand. People want to get out of the city. They want to get out to the mountains, get out to the lake, whatever. But because they're small towns and they're not vacation rental markets, there is no infrastructure where you could just off the shelf operate. There's no property manager you could hire. There's no cleaning company you could hire. There's very few reputable handymen you could hire. So it's really difficult to spin up field operations. So it's a long-winded way of saying where we're successful is where there is a lot of inherent demand because it's close to a city, but it's really difficult to operate on your own because of what I just described. So we went in and built a lot of those operations. We are hiring those staff ourselves. We both manage the fund and we are the property manager. And I think that is what's made us successful, right? We can operate in these markets where they're really, really challenging. But if you're willing to put in the work to build out that operational effort, it goes really well. So that's one. And then within those markets, typically we're buying relatively inexpensive cabins, 200K, 250K cabins that'll generate 50K plus a gross rent. Like that's our norm. However, there are some properties in those markets that they're double the price, but they're exceptional, right? And what we've seen is some of those properties, if you manage them well, can do 100K of gross rent, and so it's worth it for us to do that. So that's a different beast, and we've sort of stumbled into some success doing that, and now we're trying to more proactively acquire some of those high end properties in addition to the more traditional 2, 3, 4 bedroom cabins like we've done for the past several years.
Cool. And all right, I lied. Last question here. So, are you accepting any more funds into your fund?
Yeah, that's a good question. So no, the short answer is no. Fund 2 we raised about a year ago. We'll be deploying out of that fund through the end of next year. At which case, assuming things are still going well, we'll definitely raise a third fund and a fourth fund. So if folks are interested, obviously, if they reach out, you can see us. It's staybluemaple.com is the site. But for now, no, we're not taking more capital for the next year or so.
Got it. Cool. All right, Conrad, let's jump into it.
No, very, very good. And I love, kind of hearing, your thought process, Tony, because I do think it is very unique in our space. And there's people that I think are trying to do what you do, but I've not seen them operate with the same level of, I guess, like efficiency and honesty. Like I've seen the deck, you've sent it to me
Sure.
before, and it's like, it's so refreshing to see someone who's like taking it very seriously, doing it the right way, and isn't lining their pockets with a bunch of fees, which is what some folks in the space do, and not actually deliver for the investor. So let's dive into the mistakes. A little bit different for sure. The listener, if they haven't picked up on it so far, right? Tony is not managing for other homeowners. Maybe I think you explored that briefly, correct, Tony? Like you thought about it.
Yeah, we have a few folks. Maybe people come to us all the time.
Yeah.
But we have a couple of investors that we manage for, but 95% of the inventory is stuff that we own.
Right. And I think that's such a different, model. A lot of these previous episodes we've talked about have been how do you manage the homeowner relationship and like all the dynamics that come with that. So this is going to be a little bit different for sure, and in a good way in my mind. So number one, not taking the time to plan. I went years without doing real yearly, quarterly, and monthly planning, and we wasted so much time on things that didn't move the needle. What was the process here like from where you started to where you are today with planning and doing planning with the business with Blue Maple?
Yeah, well, I'll kick off the lessons learned here to say what I found really awesome about this exercise was the lessons learned for me in building this business. It's looking back on the software experience as well, and there's a ton of commonality just in the process of building a small, high growth business, regardless of industry. And I think this is one of those like aha moments for me as I reflect on contextually my last company and now this company. Previously, I think I've always done a pretty good job of keeping myself accountable to like, oh, this is what I'm going to do this week, and this is what the team's going to do this week or this month. But I think I poo-pooed the idea of actually spending the time to plan longer out, like monthly, quarterly, annually. And as a result, it just felt like we were constantly zigzagging in my last business of what we were doing, right? We would run 100 miles an hour, work super hard, but we would be like shifting the goalposts all the time and not really accomplishing a ton. And so I don't think it was a specific moment in time that I can point to where it was like a light switch where it changed. But today, at every cadence, annually, quarterly, monthly, weekly, I'm spending the time, right? And obviously, if it's weekly, it's only more like half an hour. Annually, it's days to plan out what we're going to do. Because I'd much rather take the time to make sure that we're doing the right thing versus spending all this energy doing a bunch of things that aren't going to actually move the needle and the things that matter most to the business. So that's not a rocket science point, but it is. I just find that certainly in software startup land, but also in vacation rental, or talking to my other property manager peers, I don't think people do enough of it. And I'm such a huge believer at this point in just doing that planning.
Yeah, I totally agree with this. I mean, it's so funny because you can find yourself busy all day long, and at the end of the day, you're like, "What did I accomplish? Nothing." You know what I mean? Maybe you responded to a ton of emails, but did it move the needle? And that's why we try to. We follow kind of the EOS where we step away at least once a year, if not quarterly, kind of look at more of the strategic, kind of set those 1 year, 3 year, 5 year goals. How can we call it like those big rocks? What are those big rocks that you can adjust?
Totally.
And this reminds me of a story from Jason Sprinkle with Key Data Dashboards, now formerly with 360 Blue. And they had a CEO, Ashley, and I'm going to massacre the story, but it's something like this. He said, "Look, here's what I need you to do, Ashley. Go out there and figure a way that you can find another $1 million in EBITDA." All right. So she literally went away for a week, like no distractions, like turned off her email. And she literally just started like brainstorming different ways to add $1 million in EBITDA to their bottom line. And she came back and she figured it out. She had like 2 or 3 bullet points, 2 or 3, kind of those big rocks, big movements that they can make. And they did it. And they ended up adding another $1 million in EBITDA and ended up selling. And I'm sure they got a big multiple on that extra $1 million. And the rest is history. But it's like sometimes you need to kind of step away to see that big picture and be able to get that.
Yeah, I think to piggyback on that, there's maybe 3 pieces to it. And I know we'll circle back to KPIs later in the conversation, but there's what should you focus on, right? What are the things we actually need to accomplish in the business? There's some tactics that are probably tied to that, right? Like, let's say we want to drive more direct bookings in our business, right? That's a high level goal. There are tactics to achieve it. But then the question is like, how do you know whether what you're doing is successful or not? And what do you do as a result? I think that last question is just as important as what you focus on as well. Because I think if at least annually, often those big goals, those big rocks don't change. The tactics certainly change. And the tactics should change based on the feedback that you're getting on what you're doing. Right. What always bugs me is when people spend this inordinate amount of energy tracking the tactics or what they're doing, but they're not tracking the outcomes that they're trying to move. Right. And I don't really care. Just like I don't care how many hours in a day a given person works on my team necessarily, I care about what they're achieving, what their outcomes are. Similarly, I don't care necessarily the tactics that we're doing. I'll have an opinion about it, but I really care about the needle we're moving on the key levers, the key KPIs. Anyway, we can talk more about it, but I think it's tied to this idea of planning and what are the goals.
That's incredible. I'm going to go back and listen to that one again and just send it to my entire team.
Yeah.
Solid.
Sure.
Awesome. Well, let's head over to number 2 then. Getting stuck in analysis paralysis and moving too slowly. There often isn't a perfect decision, and nearly all decisions can be undone or changed. I don't know, Tony, if you've heard of the Jeff Bezos where it's like one-way door, two-way door. We've referenced that probably half a dozen times on this one. But yeah, what's kind of your journey been there on decision-making and learning about maybe the one-way, two-way door conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like an analytical guy to my core, right? Like I love numbers. I'm good at math. Like I'm love spreadsheets. Like, so left to my own devices, and my business partner Brant is the same way, right? We complement each other in different ways, but we are very similar in this way. And that has lots of strengths to that skill set. The downside to it is that, I seek out and crave perfect information in a world where that often is not possible. And I think this is true at Contactually, and it's certainly still true at Blue Maple. We're still overly conservative around wanting to make certain the decision is like bulletproof or like very tight versus being like, it's 80% or it's 70%. It's good enough. Your point, I don't know exactly the Bezos quote you're referring to, but I think it refers to a general philosophy that I believe, which is there are very few decisions in life that aren't reversible.
Right.
And so that's kind of your point of one way versus two way. And so I've really tried to ground in that mindset. There was a coach I worked with years ago where she really pushed me to like shift my thinking in that way. And that has helped. But look, it's at the end of the day, I think what's helped the most is I know analysis paralysis is something I'm prone to. I know it's a strength, but it's a weakness if I let it go too long. And so I push myself and my team to say, what's the problem we're trying to solve, right? Let's go, like, let's not lose sight of that problem, right? We're trying to drive more direct bookings as an example. Here are some tactics and ideas. Let's gather data around maybe what's been driving direct, what we think could drive direct, but then like, let's make a decision and let's move, right? Because we can reverse it if we need to 99% of the time. I'm not great at it always, but I'm getting better at it. I'm certainly better than where I was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge fan of the All In podcast. If nobody listens to that, if you're not listening to that, please do that. It's probably my strategy lesson every single week. But David Friedberg, who I love on that, super brilliant guy, he has a quote. It says, "The rate at which you can make decisions is a far greater predictor of success than the accuracy of the decisions you do make." So you have to be willing to embrace failure. You have to be willing to make decisions that could result in something not being done correctly. And I just love that. And that's why one of our core, I've said this before, but one of our core values is slow down the big decisions, speed up the rest. And the idea is, you have probably 2 or 3 decisions every year that you need to make, that you need to take time on, you need to think about. But all the other ones you can answer pretty quickly. And the worst thing you can do is make no decision.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because all these things taken in isolation, they feel like they're conflicting pieces of advice, right? Yeah. We just said 5 minutes ago, take the time to plan, focus on the big rocks, identify those things. And now we're saying, look, move really quickly, iterate and whatnot. And I think both are needed, right? Take the time to plan, call your shots, what you're going to make, try to do the pre-mortem on what will go potentially poorly, what will go well, what we need to track for success, but also like just do it, right? Just implement, just get something, get a V1 out, learn from it, iterate, go from there. I'm like so allergic to the idea of like planning forever to get something out in the wild. And then it just flops, right? Like, no, get something. There's almost anything should be able to get out in, hours, if not, or a day. You shouldn't need to be taking days or months or weeks or months. And yeah, that's,
on the software
side, about this, it bothers me a lot. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, on the software side, I think it was Reid Hoffman that says, if you're not embarrassed by your MVP, you're released too late,
Exactly.
Get it out in the hands and iterate and learn. And I'm sure there's a lot of learning lessons there in the short-term rental industry that you can learn from that too.
Totally.
Awesome. Well, we'll head it over to number 3 then. Number 3, keeping someone on the team who's not working out, waiting to fire someone is hurting both the business and them. Hate to say, Tony, this one came up over and over again. I feel like we all just have to go through this, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, I think we like people and we like to think we are good people. And so it's like no one likes to fire somebody. No one likes to let somebody go, right? So that's just a truism. It is the case, however, that if you're doing the exercise we just talked about, you're establishing clear goals, you're establishing what success looks like for the business, but also for a person, and they're not delivering. I think with a junior person, it's worthwhile to invest and maybe try to get them to iterate. And like, I think the idea of a performance improvement plan or a PIP is always important, but certainly with a senior person, I just have very little tolerance for lack of delivery against what success looks like. And it's disservice to them and to the business to keep that person in the seat. I've had to let go of a handful of folks in the last company, in my current one, and I can't think of a single person that I regretted that decision or that I felt like I did it too soon. It's always the opposite. So I think that's just a truism, a lesson learned that I'm not perfect at it. I'm just trying to get better for the next time, right? To not allow something to fester.
Yeah.
I mean,
for sure.
I don't have much to add on this because we've talked about this on every single podcast, but I think, Tony, this is like the 15th time we talked about this, but it's, as Steve Trover calls it, look, it's 36 hours of suck and then it gets better,
Totally. For both people, yes. Right? Like,
yeah. Yeah, because like you
Anyway,
said, I think one thing, Tony, that I've always felt too is like I've had to do this, recently, unfortunately, but it was like it wasn't a surprise either during this call. It was like, yes, I know because you told me X, Y, Z, multiple times over multiple months, and this wasn't happening, so I'm not happy, but I understand why you made that decision. I feel like that's the least that you can do for
yeah.
someone is like make it clear why you're making the decision. If it is something performance related versus like financial is sort of a different conversation. But yeah, I mean, it's if you're clear with the person, then I find when I've had to do it in the past, it's like I'm upset, but I totally understand, which is, I think, all you can ask for in that conversation to have, for sure.
Yep, agreed. And by the way, if it's a surprise for them, I think that's also a failure on your part and the business's
100%.
part, right?
Yeah,
It's like
exactly.
you probably didn't define the success metrics. You probably weren't being very clear of like to what degree they were tracking to them or not. You should be giving them that feedback along the way.
Right.
Anyway, I think
I
that's an obvious point as well, but I think that helps lessen that that maybe angst that we might feel otherwise.
Yeah.
If they are shocked by it, it's shame on you. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the least you could do in that scenario, for sure. Awesome. Well, number 4, actually, you alluded to this a minute ago, Tony. I'm curious your perspective on it because I waited a long time before doing this too. Not working with a coach or other sounding board. We all need someone to help us take a step back and see the bigger picture. You still check in with the coach every 2 weeks. I don't always know what we'll talk about, but the act of having to talk to her forces me to step back and identify the big strategic decisions I need to make. So I was hesitant to do this too, Tony. And then I did it, and I was like, one of those things,
Yeah.
right? Why didn't I do this earlier? What was kind of your journey with this process as well?
Yeah, I mean, it was my last company. I mean, look, the reason people don't hire coaches is because they're very expensive, or they can be, right? When you think of a traditional coach that you're working, like a venture-backed startup hiring a coach is like tens of thousands of dollars for like a 6-month period. It is very expensive, and that was the type of coach that I had hired. Didn't do it for 4 or 5 years in the business, and I didn't because it felt like big suck of time and big cost. Ultimately, though, right, for the person, like the CEO of the business or a senior executive in the business, who is calling the shots on what we're going to focus on, what are those goals, and is really critical to the success of the business, not doing whatever you can to equip yourself or that person to be as effective as possible. It's just being a penny wise and a pound foolish type of thing, right? And so, I hired a coach. This is probably 5-6 years ago at this point. She helped me assess, like, what are some of my own blind spots that I'm consistently, it's leading me to make bad decisions or act in a way that's not helpful to the business, and I was able to work on those things. So that was that one experience. That was costly, but I think maybe it's more relevant to folks who aren't working with a coach or like thinking or on the fence about it. I mentioned that I'm still working with a coach today. It's like the antithesis of that person I just described. That's like very expensive. This someone's very inexpensive. I'm connecting with. It's like I think $100 a call. I'm connecting with her every 2 weeks, and she bills herself as an accountability coach. But how I use her, it's a half an hour call, is it's forcing me to go into that conversation with what are the big questions that they're in the back of my head, but I haven't fully articulated them. But knowing that I've got this call in the books, I've paid for it, it's like enough of a nudge to get me to articulate it, put it on paper, share it with her. And because she's very experienced and talented and works across a lot of clients, she's able to sort of be that sounding board and bat around those questions with me and help me make a better decision. I mean, all kinds of questions around hiring and firing and strategic decisions in the business. And I mean, as I said in the book, right? Like, I don't always know where that conversation is going to go. And often in the morning of those calls, I'm like, fuck, what are we going to talk about? But at the end of the day, it's always 95% of the time, it's been extremely successful, very helpful. So I'm just a huge believer. I think people should surround themselves with someone like that. That's forcing you to take stock, do the inventory that you might not be doing otherwise.
I'm curious, was the coach you had originally, they're probably what, 100x the cost or 10x the cost? Was it worth that extra amount? Or for you, do you get enough out of this $100 session mentor?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, they were both very valuable in different ways, right? The one was like an intensive, let me interview a bunch of other people on your team. We'll survey anonymously as well. Let's collect the bevy of like feedback around your strengths and weaknesses. And then let's focus on how can you continue to flex those strengths and how can you address the most like crippling weaknesses. So, that was just more intensive. And I think the only way to encounter those blind spots is, I shouldn't say the only way, that is a great way to encounter blind spots, right? I'm certain there are blind spots today that by working with the coach, Stacy is her name, that I'm working with today, I mean, she's only consuming what I'm giving her, right? And so if I'm not bringing a blind spot to her, she's not commenting on it. So that's I guess you get what you pay for. I've been extremely satisfied, or like I feel like it's incredibly valuable what I'm doing today. So I haven't felt the need to seek out something more intensive. But it's probably a good push. Maybe I should every couple of years like redo a version like that.
Maybe you can do it on an annual basis or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I signed up for BetterUp. I don't know if you ever heard of that, but it's kind of where you can go and get these coaches and mentors. And the coach I had was actually fantastic. He was a former SaaS, CEO. Had a nice exit. He's retired. He was probably in his early 60s. Great guy. And but it was one of those things where I didn't have like a recurring meeting, and it's like you had to schedule it, and we never did. So like it ended up just falling off. But I think I used it for like 6 months, and I really liked it. So my accountability to you, Conrad and Tony, is I'm going to sign up for BetterUp again. So
there you go.
Get that.
Yeah, I can't say enough good things about doing something like that. I think that
like
practice is extremely helpful.
It was like $200 a month. It was like nothing,
Yeah. I call it business therapy a little bit, Tony, because I'll be like, all right, here's all the problems I'm having, like when I start.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's very similar. The way I use it is very similar to therapy.
Yeah, which I think is, we all can benefit from that in some respect, for sure. Well, let's head over to number 5. Number 5, failing to take time off during the week, month for me. Life's too short to constantly grind. And the funny thing is, I think the business is often better off when I do. Well, we joked before we hit record that I was just on a vacation, and I came up with so many ideas in that vacation. So I don't know what your perspective is here, Tony, if it's like getting away and disconnecting, but you can often think of great ideas while you're not like grinding in front of the laptop all day, at least for me. What's that journey been like for you?
Yeah. What the journey has been like is like previously, especially when I didn't have kids, I would work really long hours. I've never been a huge weekend working person, but I would work, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. and do that regularly. And occasionally on the weekends. And it was like all consuming. Right? It was just did a lot of that. I think when I had kids, and I have 3, 7, 5, and 2. So like, I think that changes perspective, but also just changes reality where like, I was not able to do that, right? I had to be home. I had to make dinner, bath time, etc. So that was already crunching. But I think the big aha for me initially was, I am achieving, like our business is just as successful despite the fact that I am by definition putting in fewer hours. That's interesting. And that's just kind of reacting to my situation. What if I was proactive and just put bounds around the things that I value, right? There are things outside of my business that I want to do with my friends, like stuff I love to hike and camp, like going hiking. Like, let me just do that. Let me allocate time for those things. And I suspect things won't actually be that materially different, and they weren't. So it's a long-winded way of saying today, I work basically 8 to 5 and never work on the weekends. And every 3 weeks, I take a Thursday off and I go do a big hike with a friend or with my dog. And I'll take, multi-week vacations in the summer. And like, I just don't sweat it. And I think, I think I'm still working hard. I think I'm very intense about the time that I'm on the clock. But I'm very intentional of the time I'm off the clock. And I try to ensure that the things that I value, time with my family, time with my friends, time in nature, like I'm allocating time now when I'm in my prime years to those things versus kidding myself that like, oh yeah, that'll come later down the road or something. Because I think that's just an artifice that people convince themselves of and never actually do. So anyway, that's my life philosophy, and it has gone well. And I think I'm better off for it, and I think the business is better off for it.
I love that. Yeah. It's almost like scheduling the things that are really important to you first, and then work goes around that, as opposed to the other way around, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I'm like so calendar driven. I schedule all of this stuff. It's on my calendar, and I just don't double book it.
I love it. Yeah. Love it. This came up time and time again, Tony. I mean, in the book, if you remember, I think there was I remember Sarah Bradford talked about it, Steve Trover, Jed Stevens, Brian Olson, Maureen Reagan, Mike Harrington, like everybody talked about. David Angotti had a good quote. It said something to the effect of, he said he neglected his own health and happiness by not putting proper boundaries in place. And he had this mantra of treat each owner like they're the only owner. And he lived by that. And that came at a personal cost because he gave up his exercise, date nights. Totally. He'd even let owners interrupt critical time with his kids and his wife. So he said those boundaries are an absolute must.
Yeah. I feel like
I would say it's interesting. Sorry to cut you off, Conrad. My wife's a partner at a law firm, and she does litigation, so she goes to trial. So I'd say what's interesting about that world philosophy, or like business life philosophy that I just described, is it very much is like juxtaposed with being an attorney going to trial at the behest of a client and at the courts, where they don't really care what's going on in your life. The deadline's the deadline, and you're going to work all hours. So it's like natural tension. It's creative friction, frankly, with my wife and I. But it also forces both of us to reflect on this topic. Like, what does a well lived life look like? What do we want out of this? Out of this experience that we call life. How can we live more intentionally with each other, with our kids, and then how do we allocate time to the things that mean something to us, each other, our kids, etc. So anyway, it just we have this conversation quite a bit, and it's something I feel incredibly strongly about. And so I have, I guess, given up some potential upside, I'm sure, and just focusing on some of the personal stuff. But I think at the end of the day, like, we got one life. We got to live it now. It's not, you don't have another shot,
That's right.
Yeah. Well, the story I was going to say, Tony, is that I feel like this happened to my own father. Like, he would work a ton and he kind of burned out. Like, so when he sold his company at 50, he was just like, yeah, I'm done. Like, he in other words, like, his stamina, I think, was lower. So I actually don't know if you're giving up that much upside, because I wonder if you can keep doing it a lot longer and have a longer career where you're not constantly stressed. Like, if you go 100% and the engine blows up, so to speak, then the car's on the side of the road. Whereas the guy going, 70 miles an hour is going to pass you eventually, even if he's kind of behind you at some various point before. So that's kind of my view on it too, right? It's like taking time away and having time away means maybe I can do this till I'm 65 and not feel really stressed out and anxious. And I mean, Brooke, that was our last episode, right? Someone who sold their company and said, I just couldn't do it anymore. I was so stressed out and they burned out. If they just had more balance in their life, perhaps they could have kept that company growing and kept it going longer, and they actually would have made more long term. Maybe if in the short term it would have been a little bit less, but long term it would have made more. So at least that's my view on it. Yeah. Awesome. Well, number 6, then we'll keep things moving along here. Tony, number 6, investing too little into conferences and networking. The relationships that I build going to conferences almost always generate so much more value than the cost of ticket and travel. It's a big investment in time suck, but always worth it. We met at a conference in person, Vegas, I think last year for VRMA. Yeah. So yeah, what's kind of your current step and journey into taking time for conferences, and how have you benefited from it?
Yeah. I mean, to where we started this conversation with Brooke, like I think naturally I'm interested in people. I like to meet new people, and I think I'm pretty good at being proactive about reaching out to folks one-on-one and hopping on a call, getting to know them. So I do that consistently already. What I think is special and unique about a conference, though, is it's a little less directed, and it's more like, people have written about this idea of like increasing your luck surface area, right? The area or the odds where like luck can strike. I think a conference is sort of like that. Like, put yourself in the room of other people that can help you, or that you're just interested in, or can help you grow your business. And you don't know where those conversations, you don't know who you're going to meet. You don't know where those conversations are going to go. And you often don't know, at least in my case, I don't know, where the benefit will come from these relationships. But what I have found over and over and over again is I go into those conferences, especially if I'm a little bit more, proactive or tactical about it, where I have a list of people that I know I'm going to be there. I know I want to meet. I'll in advance reach out to them, try to schedule like a one-on-one. It's just invaluable. And I'll meet with someone like you, Conrad, and I'll often ask, like, oh, who else is here that I should know? Who's doing like interesting stuff? Anyone who's acquiring, you'd be like, oh yeah, you should know Tim. And it just accelerates that networking so quickly in terms of number of people, and then the depth of interaction that you're able to have is just so much richer when you're able to meet in person, grab a drink, grab dinner, whatever. I know going into every single one, I'm like, why am I doing it? I'm going to DARM, the revenue management conference, next week, and I'm having this feeling. It's like, such a distraction. Like, why am I doing this? But I'm very confident that I will come away from that conference knowing a lot more people who can help shape our revenue management thinking and my own thinking. And I know that will be incredibly valuable. So that's why I do it.
Yeah, 100%. We talk about this every single time, so I don't want to beat a dead horse. But Tony, I think you're kind of the master at this. I mean, the fact that you just out of the blue reached out to me, didn't know who I was. And then I remember talking to somebody else. I'm like, you need to talk to Tony. And they're like, oh, I already did. He already reached out to me. I was like, man, this guy like networks with everybody. And it's just like, you just got into the industry too. It's like, I guess you looked at who all the interesting people were in the space and said, let me reach out to them. But you always get takeaways from it, and there's always connections. And as Steve Jobs said something about, you can only connect the dots, looking in arrears, and it always ends up coming to play there. So.
Yeah. I mean, just to one last thought on this. I think my philosophy is shaped a lot from what I experienced myself and what I would want. Like, I ran a SaaS business. It was successful. We sold it. I'm very open with my email and my phone number online. People can reach out. I don't get a ton of inbound where people are like, hey, do you want to talk about this? Like, I don't get a ton of those. And when I do get them, they come into two camps, right? It's just the generic. I guess I do get a lot of generic inbound of like whatever crap, and like it's obvious that it's just generic, and I'm gonna always put that in the garbage. And then I get very few people who are reaching out genuinely, where they did a little bit of like, they came across me on a podcast or whatever, and they're like, hey, I heard XYZ and I'm really interested in learning more. Like, would you be down to hop on a call? I'll take those calls all day long because they're interesting and you never know where they're going to go. And so it's like that lens that I apply to all that one-on-one outreach. It's like, I won't do it unless I want to take my time and your time to actually talk about something relevant. Likely, if it's relevant to me, interesting to me, it's probably going to be interesting and relevant to you. And I know that you're probably not getting a lot of those or really personal outreach. And so I find my hit rate, my response rate is really high, and the conversations are really good. So I do it a lot. Yeah. So anyway, I just wish, I think more people should do it. I think they get intimidated thinking, I don't know why they don't, but I wish they would.
There you go. Email Tony at staybluemaple.com.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, yeah, I'm happy. Yeah, please, honestly, email. Like 5 people will. It just never happens.
If that, yeah. And like you said, Tony,
exactly.
The quantity of inbound that I get to is very high, but yeah, the quality of it is very low. It seems like those things are actually in, opposite. The more I get, the worse it gets. It's like, I want to fill your calendar. I joked about this on something I did with Paul recently, Brooke. I'm like, I want the opposite. I want my calendar empty, actually. But yeah. A lot of bad sales stuff goes on there. Well, number 7, being too conservative with investing in the business is similar to the analysis paralysis point. Sometimes you need to make some bets to identify the true step function that'll massively improve the business. So like you said, some things that you kind of already touched on, but anything else to expand upon with like investing in the business, that idea?
Yeah, it's the same general theme for sure. Like it just this being, again, wanting perfect information and without it being like gun shy when trying to invest. It happens with us. I mean, I'm still making this mistake, but I know I'm my proclivities, and so I'm trying to like insulate myself against it. As an example, we buy a bunch of cabins with Blue Maple today. We've started buying land, and we've started building like glamping domes and whatnot and doing it. And it started with these little bets. In fact, my business partner, Brant, I remember we had drinks and he was like, I know that you're scared to do this. And I know we haven't done it. And so there's no data to indicate this is going to go well. But like, here's why this is a relatively low risk bet. And here are initial signals that will allow us to say, like, look, we can build a dome on this other land that we already have next to a cabin. And like, anyway, it's a long-winded way of saying I try to ask my team and people in my like trusted circle, coach, business partner, whatever, to like push me to like, hey, what are those big bets that maybe we should make that we haven't made? And what's a V1 of that we could make now to give us more confidence such that we can then put a lot behind the big bet? Because you can't make none of them. You have to make some big bets or you're going to probably stagnate or not grow as quickly as you could. So anyway, I don't know that I have a great system to address it. I just know that it's something I don't do enough of. And so I try to set up my planning in world to push me to do more of it.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever, I think the book is called like the $100 Startup, Tony, have you ever read that? Where they do the graphic and they have like version 1 is the bicycle, version 2 is like, the motorcycle, and then version 3 is the sports car. I don't know if that resonates with you.
I have not seen that.
No, but
it resonates. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I like that idea too. It's like, what is the simplest version of this? So like the glamping dome would be like, not buy additional land, like use land you already have, find someone that already knows how to do the dome. So, everything's going to come already assembled or they can put it together on site. Like I could see how you could come up with that where it's going to risk maybe $10,000 or $20,000, not $400,000, which might be like, let's go buy 50 acres and do a whole thing, right? Like, and then you could do that after you've gone through that process. So sorry, Brooke, I jumped ahead of you.
No, that's great. If I remember, and we can edit this if Tony, if you're embarrassed me bringing this up, but if I remember from your psychometric personality assessment, you are what's called like a tech expert or like an architect. So your A trait, which is like your driving trait, think of it as a gas pedal, is exactly where your D trait is, which is your detail or your compliance. So you're actually, it's called a stacked AD. And what that means is it's kind of like grandma you always see the grandma that's driving. She's got 1 foot on the gas, 1 foot on the brake. Like that's you. Like you want to go, but you're so cautious because you're so accurate and so precise. You don't want to make any mistakes. So you're almost like in this like dilemma of not knowing like what you want to do. You want to go, but you also want to hit in the brakes. And so you're kind of in this internal dilemma with yourself.
Yeah, I think it's a fair summary. I think it's just knowing that about yourself, right? In my case, in myself. Again, I've tried to just like push myself to do more of it, set up guardrails so it like gives me comfort, but we're also doing more. We just put an offer in on this 40 acres yesterday, and it's like taking this on medicine that I'm talking about, right? It's like, how can I push, like, we know we want to do this. How do I get comfortable with this idea? And it's like, anyway, I'm getting better at it, but it's something that I've had to get better at.
I feel like that's tough, Tony. Go ahead, Brooke. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Conrad.
No, I was gonna say I feel like it's always tough when Brooke mentions something from that personality assessment I did that like speaks to, like hits you right in the chest, and you're like, yeah, that's exactly what my problem is. You see right through me in some respect. It also bothers me, Brooke. By the way, this is a total sidebar. My type, the scholar, like almost nobody is that type, so I'm like, I'm just a weirdo. Like you talk about people like, oh, that person's just like that person, but like no one else is my type, so I'm just like, oh gosh, I have all sorts of problems.
My wife gives me this. Like she gives me grief because she's like, when you look at people, like you literally look at their dots. So like when I look at Conrad, I'm looking at his dots in my head, and when I look at Tony, I'm looking at his dots, and like I have almost like a photographic memory when it comes to people's psychometric personality assessments. It's really weird. It's a blessing and a curse, but it's true. Yeah. Like and so Randy, my business partner, our COO, he's the same profile as you are, Tony, and he gets caught in that. He wants to go, but then he's cautious. He wants to step back because he's so accurate, so precise. I'm sure it's a blessing and a curse for your poor wife.
Yeah, I would say as someone who's raised capital from investors, I think people see that, right? It's frankly how I talk to them about it, and I think it really does help to gain trust and confidence in people I'm going to push aggressively, but I am just conservative by nature. Like it just, that is that. And so, but yeah, there's obviously the underbelly of that is, we could be pushing harder. We're not experimenting enough, and we're trying to correct for that.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's always good to see, like you said earlier, like see your own blind spots and then work on them. It's better than the person who just ignores or like doesn't even want to address the fact that they might have this flaw. We certainly all worked with people like that in the past, which can be a little frustrating. Number 8, hiring too junior or too slowly. Don't wait until things are broken to hire someone. And when you do, don't cheap out senior people, assuming they can still execute and get in the weeds. Can 10x the business. People use the term A players, Tony, I guess, and they're very real, right? Like you find someone that's so much more better than a cheaper option. You get a lot more done. What's kind of been your journey here in hiring and trying to find the A player, mythical A player?
Yeah, I feel like I've been on this windy journey of what it looks like to hire like talented people in a team. I can tell you where we've ended up, which is, contractually we had 80 plus people. It was a fairly large company, and these are all like white collar folks, well paid behind a desk. And with Blue, I didn't enjoy it personally. I didn't enjoy managing a large team of people, a lot of junior and mid-level people, and a handful of executives. What I loved was working with really senior, talented people. And I knew I was really good at building process. And we'd always outsourced a lot of our stuff to the Philippines, like like customer support at my last company. That's a long-winded way of saying with Blue Maple, I really, initially out of necessity, because we were very small, right? And then over time, I've really tried to keep it where we've just hired senior people to run the core functions in the business. And a lot of all the operations, from guest support to ordering supplies to, doing the analysis on the properties that we're going to buy, all that's done with our remote team in the Philippines. And my objective is to continue to scale the business in a way where we're never really hiring junior people. We're hiring senior people with experience who can translate our goals into tactics very effectively, can manage a team of lower cost resources overseas to do a lot of those tactics and grow that way. And I think it's just a leaner, more scalable approach. And I don't see, again, personally, I don't like managing junior folks, but I think it's actually more effective to think about it like in senior talented people, don't cheap out on it, hire those great people, and then trust them to build like the process that's going to be a lot leaner. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it definitely does, for sure. And my read on that, Tony, speaking personally, is like sometimes that person overseas is 5 to 7 times cheaper than the US based equivalent, but they're certainly not 5 to 7 times worse, right? Like if you especially once you've defined exactly what it is you want them to get done and those sorts of parameters are set up, then obviously you can scale so much better because you're getting maybe 2x the output or 1.5x the output, but totally. At a way less expensive cost. That's for sure.
Well, and they're often they're often not worse across the whole board, right? What's right. Implied in that point you made is like, well, they're so much cheaper, they're definitely going to be at least somewhat worse. And I found it, yes, they're worse in the obvious ways, in that they don't speak English natively. Okay, so we know that's a worse component, but they're often better in terms of like adherence to detail, like showing up and like being like totally attentive during the time, like following tight process, like that kind of stuff. Oh, like being empathetic with guests. Filipinos have been awesome. Like, I don't know. There's just so many qualities that I don't think I could hire a better person in the US for, despite some of the negatives. But anyway, yeah, I'm all on board. Whatever you can outsource and build process around, do.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, we'll just kind of keep things going here from a time perspective. Number 9, over relying on KPIs and goals. I'm a numbers guy and always want to measure everything, but setting a goal or KPI without any basis for it leads to a false sense of certainty. Avoid setting an artificial numerical goal. We've kind of touched on this here and there, but I don't think that last bit, to my recollection. Avoid setting an artificial numerical goal. What would that look like? Is that just like a vanity metric, so to speak, or what's kind of been your process there? So goal setting.
Yeah. And I know I've been long-winded, so I'll try to keep this tight. We talked earlier about setting what are the rocks in the business, what are the clear goals, translating them into tactics, and how do you measure success. I'll take the example I've been talking a couple times about, like this idea of driving direct bookings. Well, that might be a really appropriate goal, and obviously success ultimately is going to be measured by what percent of your bookings is coming from direct. Right? That's pretty obvious. The question is like, what's the number that you pick, and how, like, to what degree is that like an effective goal for the team? And I guess what I'm commenting on here is I have found it, certainly earlier in my career, we would set these goals without they weren't really based in reality. And so it was somewhat like dejecting for the team. And we would plan around like the fact that we were going to hit a version of like that or 80% of that, but it was like way outside of what actually made sense, or the KPI actually didn't make sense at all. Like we were tracking the wrong thing. With the direct booking example, it's a little obvious, but it was just, I think I would overinvest in the goal, overinvest in how you're going to measure success. I think it matters less degree to which you're hitting, X or 80% of X or 150% of X, as long as you're trying to move the needle on the given KPI, if that makes sense. And I think we got overly caught up in like getting the right number really precisely. And that was a lot of, analysis paralysis, the stuff we talked about already.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I launched Vantage, I mean, I think I was so focused on growth goals of by properties. Like I failed to look at the big picture. I failed to look at the properties and what those properties were actually generating. So what I was doing is we were inherently signing up properties that we probably shouldn't have, or not probably, we definitely should not have. It probably took until, maybe third season until we finally realized, we're like, wait a sec, we can do a lot less work and get the same result by just getting better properties. But I was so focused on that goal and that metric and that KPI of my growth, because I had from like day one, I had our pro formas, really scheduled out for the kind of the 5-year growth plan. And I knew exactly where I wanted to be, and we were focused on it. And I was going to hit it come hell or high water. Come to find out, we hit it, but it wasn't necessarily the outcome we were trying to achieve. And we weren't taking on profitable properties.
Yeah.
But see, I love the fact that you had that goal. That the business just needed a governor on that, which it sounds like it didn't, right? So like you should have been hell bent on bringing on as many properties as possible, but someone else should have been hell bent on ensuring that the quality of the property is a certain standard, or ensuring that whenever we bring on, we like call out the ones that maybe aren't delivering or something. Like yeah. So that's part of the nuance difference I would push on.
I was going to give an example, Tony, about your direct booking one, where it's like someone says they don't get a lot of direct bookings today, they want a lot. I'm like, cool, give me an unlimited PPC budget, right? And we can overspend and get you a lot of direct bookings, but that would be suboptimal because we'd be losing money every reservation we made, right? So it's like, we spent $10,000 to make $10,000 gross bookings. That's a horrible return on ad spend, right? So you can game a number too. That was one thing that I thought, is obvious. Or, to your point, Brooke, okay, Brooke said sign up as many properties as possible. I'll take your crappy condo, even though it's actually, not really ideal. That's one thing I was thinking. The other thing I was thinking, Tony, about like the goal setting piece, that I've been on a team like that before that set an unrealistic goal. We didn't hit it. And then what happens though? Honestly, nothing. So then what happened, I think, on the team is that we didn't take the leadership seriously, because we're like, hey, remember when leadership set this goal and we didn't hit it and like nothing happened? Then you just kind of dismiss their future goals. Whereas like when they set a realistic goal and you can get it and it's achievable, and maybe you have, like you said, 1-2 or 1-2-3 or something like that, you hit them, you feel a lot better, and then the team can be rewarded. Like it's like you said, it's that momentum feeling versus like, let's get 100% direct bookings, then you don't do it. It's like, well, unless Tony fires me, like nothing bad's going to happen. So then I just don't trust that Tony's going to, follow through with whatever his goals are. I think that leadership gets ignored in that scenario in the future, not in that moment, but like in the future down the road, they're just like, he always does stuff like that. Just ignore it, which I think is so toxic.
Totally. Yeah. Last point on this KPI point, I think a lot about like what are maximizing goals, what are like threshold goals, and what are governors. Meaning like direct bookings is not a maximizing goal. You don't want 100% direct bookings because like what's implied in that is to do that would cost so much money that or you'd be booking it at such a low RevPAR that it wouldn't make sense to do it, right? Like, and
I
so the
agree. Yeah.
governor needs to be like a RevPAR threshold or some sort of spend threshold. Like you can't exceed those things. I think if a threshold goal is like guest experience, we actually don't want perfect 5-star reviews, because if we did that, that means we're probably spending way the hell too much money on ensuring that like every guest is refunded that had a slight complaint or whatever else. But we want a threshold that we want to achieve, like 4.85 out of 5 or whatever it is, right? And that we're willing to spend and do the efforts to get to that, but we're not going to like, spend so much money to get that last mile, So anyway, that's how I think about it. That can maybe help influence some of the goals and KPIs.
Yeah, for sure. Well, number 10, taking us home here, Tony. Not taking the time to celebrate the wins. Have fun. I like that as an ending point here. So we kind of talked about it earlier about like work, but when you get a big victory, going back to the KPI conversation from just a second ago, like sit down your team and enjoy it. What's kind of been your process today when you guys hit goals or hit numbers or you celebrate wins? How do you do that today?
Yeah, I mean, look, in general, and I talked about this earlier with like philosophy on like business and life, there's just so much more to all of us have bigger lives than what we're working on in our respective companies. It's probably more so for us. We all own our companies, but certainly for a person on your team, right? They got a lot of shit going on. And so like make what they're doing to get paid fun. And that could be anything from just, sharing stupid GIFs in Slack to like whenever, for example, here's a really easy one that we do. Whenever someone joins, I always send an email to the team saying like, hey, like Bob's joining the team, want to welcome on board. And I will put this like really stupid looking animated GIF in there of like Oprah like being like, welcome, or something stupid. And I think it's demonstrating to that new person and to the rest of the team, like, this is a fun, somewhat irreverent, goofy team. And like, please bring your full self and just be goofy and have fun. Like, it doesn't need to be serious. Separately, and maybe a bigger point, 3 times a year we get our US team together and we'll go just do fun stuff together. I'm a big believer in like getting to know people, and we'll go play pickleball or go to dinner, or we'll do like, I don't know, we'll just do like, it's no like wow aha thing, but it's just recognize that we're doing this all for a reason that's not just making a paycheck. And so if we can make it fun, there's no reason not to. So I don't know, that's my take on it.
That's great.
Right on.
I think that's how we ended the book, actually, was exactly that. Celebrate the wins. And we had 3 or 4 people say something very similar to that, Tony. And the one I'll end with here is Dustin Abney with Portoro. Says, constantly find joy in what you do, have fun while doing it, and celebrate the wins. So,
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Tony, for your time. We really appreciate it. I know we went a bit over here. So we appreciate you sticking with us and kind of finishing the recording here. If you've got a lot of value out of this and you had fun listening, then surely it would help if you went to your podcast app of choice and left 5 stars, because unlike Tony, we want all 5-star reviews in all of our stays all the time. No, I kid. Not giving it too hard of a time there, but we appreciate you. We'll catch you in the next episode. Thanks so much for listening.
All right. So, Tony, if you could go back and give your 25-year-old self some advice, what would it be?
It's a good question. Look, I think it's a lot of what we touched on already, but maybe if there's a bedrock point, it's like, look, Tony, you're a smart guy. Like, things are going to work out, so don't freak out about it, right? That's probably like, don't over-index in any one thing, right? Live a balanced life. Things will work out, and ultimately, kind of what we touched on a few times, life's too short, right? So invest in your health, invest in your relationships, invest in time with your future family, because goes by quick, and you don't want to live a life of regrets. I think that's probably it.
I love that. That's great. Well, thank you.